What if the pain you are trying to escape is the very thing trying to wake you up? What if the heartbreak, the betrayal, the silence, the anxiety at 3 a.m. are not interruptions of your life, but invitations? Most people spend their days negotiating with pain. We distract ourselves, we numb ourselves, we tell ourselves we will deal with it later. But 8 centuries ago, a man dared to say something almost dangerous, that pain is not a punishment, but a doorway, that the wound is not where you end, but where you begin. That man was Rumi. And what he understood about suffering is something most of us are never taught. We are taught to be strong, to be composed, to move on quickly, but we are not taught how to sit inside the fire without trying to escape the heat. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Read that again. Not after the wound heals, not once the pain is gone. The wound itself is the opening. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is a radical redefinition of suffering. We think of pain as a sign that something has gone wrong. Rumi saw it as a sign that something is breaking open. There's a difference between breaking apart and breaking open. One leads to bitterness, the other leads to transformation. But the difference is not in the event, it is in how we meet it. When Rumi speaks about pain, he is not speaking from theory. His life was divided in two, before and after loss. Before he met Shams, he was a respected scholar, a teacher, a man of structure and certainty. After love shattered him, after separation tore through him, he became a poet of fire. It was not comfort that made him luminous, it was longing, it was absence. It was the unbearable space left behind when something you love disappears. And instead of closing that space, he entered it. Instead of numbing the ache, he listened to it. He wrote, "Where there is ruin, there is hope for a treasure." Ruin is not a word we like. Ruin suggests collapse, failure, humiliation. Yet Rumi suggests that ruin is sacred ground. Why? Because when everything you built your identity on begins to crack, your relationship, your plans, the image of yourself, you are forced to confront what remains. And what remains is more real than what you constructed. Pain strips away illusion. It removes what is false. It exposes attachments you did not know were controlling you. And in that exposure, something honest begins to breathe. Most of us experience pain as an enemy because we resist it. We say, "This should not be happening." We argue with reality. But pain intensifies when it is resisted. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more force you use, the more violently it pushes back. Eventually, you become exhausted. Rumi's wisdom is not about enjoying pain, it is about ceasing the war against it. He invites us to let the ball rise, to let the grief be grief, to let the anger speak, to let the loneliness reveal its message. He wrote, "Try to learn to let what is simply be." This is not passive resignation, it is profound courage. To let what is be means to sit in the dark without immediately reaching for a light switch. It means to feel the tremor in your chest without distracting yourself with noise. It means to admit that something inside you is breaking and to stay present as it breaks. Because sometimes what is breaking is not your heart, it is your illusion of control. And when that illusion falls, something far more spacious appears. Rumi saw pain as a form of intelligence, not intellectual intelligence, but existential intelligence. Pain points, it indicates, it reveals where you were attached, where you were afraid, where you were still clinging to a version of yourself that no longer fits. Think about it. You do not feel pain when you lose something you never cared about. Pain measures love. It measures investment. It measures the depth of your vulnerability. So when you feel intense suffering, it is not proof of weakness. It is proof that you have loved, that you have hoped, that you have opened yourself to life. And yet, here's the paradox. The same openness that allows you to love is the openness that allows you to be hurt. So the question becomes, will you close yourself to avoid pain, or will you remain open and accept that pain is part of the cost of aliveness? Rumi chose openness. Even after loss, even after longing, he did not harden. Instead, he allowed the ache to carve him deeper. And in that carving, his poetry was born. Not polished by comfort, but shaped by fire. When he says the cure for pain is in the pain, he is pointing towards something subtle. We usually search for a cure outside the experience. We want a technique, a solution, a distraction, a replacement. But what if the healing is not outside the wound? What if the wound contains the map? If you sit quietly with grief without labeling it as wrong, you begin to notice layers. Beneath anger, there may be fear. Beneath fear, there may be love. Beneath love, there may be a longing for connection that has always been there. Pain becomes a doorway to depth. But to walk through that doorway, you must stop running. And this is where most people turn back. Because when you stop running, the silence becomes loud. Memories surface, regrets appear. Old stories demand to be seen. It feels easier to scroll, to drink, to overwork, to chase validation. Yet Rumi's path suggests something else, that if you stay, if you remain with the discomfort long enough, something unexpected begins to happen. The pain shifts, not because it disappears, but because your relationship to it changes. And when your relationship changes, the meaning changes. And when the meaning changes, the suffering transforms. Transforms not into pleasure, but into clarity. And clarity is often more powerful than comfort, because comfort keeps you asleep, while clarity rearranges your entire life. Rumi understood that suffering has layers. The first layer is the event itself, the loss, the rejection, the illness, the disappointment. The second layer is the story you tell about the event. This should not have happened. I am not enough. Life is unfair. It is this second layer that multiplies pain. The mind tries to protect you by creating explanations, but often those explanations become prisons. Rumi invites you to notice the story without becoming it, to observe the narrative forming in your mind and ask, is this truth or is this fear speaking? He wrote, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open?" At first glance, it sounds almost naive. How can someone in deep pain feel that any door is open? But the prison he speaks of is not the circumstance, it is identification. When you say, I am broken, you fuse your identity with your wound. When you say, I am experiencing pain, something subtle shifts. You are no longer the pain itself, you are the awareness in which pain is appearing. This distinction may seem small, but it is transformative. Awareness has space. Pain suffocates when it believes it is the whole sky. There is a reason Rumi's poetry feels expansive even when it speaks of heartbreak. He is constantly pointing beyond the surface of the experience. He is not denying the ache, he is refusing to reduce himself to it. In one of his verses, he says, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." Notice the trust embedded in that statement. It is not blind optimism. It is the understanding that every intense experience changes you. The question is not whether you will be changed, but how. If you resist, you contract. Contraction breeds bitterness. You begin to see life as something that happens against you. You build walls, and those walls protect you, but they also isolate you. If you allow, you expand. Expansion does not mean you enjoy suffering. It means you let it carve new depth within you. Think of a river cutting through rock. The rock does not choose the river, but over time, the pressure shapes something beautiful. Canyons are not formed in comfort. They are formed through persistence, through flow, through contact. Rumi's insight was deeply rooted in the mystical tradition of his time, where separation from the beloved symbolized the soul's longing for unity. But even if you strip away the spiritual language, the psychological truth remains. Pain reveals what matters. When something hurts deeply, it is because it touched something meaningful, and when that meaning is threatened, your entire being reacts. Instead of seeing that reaction as weakness, Rumi suggests seeing it as devotion. Your pain is a measure of your capacity to care. There is also humility in his vision. Pain dismantles arrogance. It humbles the ego that believed it could control outcomes, guarantee permanence, secure love. When life contradicts your plans, you face the limits of your control. This can feel devastating, but it can also feel liberating, because once you accept that you cannot control everything, you are free from the exhausting task of trying. You begin to participate in life rather than dominate it. You begin to listen instead of command. The Guest House, one of Rumi's most beloved poems, begins with the lines, "This being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival. Joy, depression, meanness, awareness, they all arrive like unexpected visitors." His instruction is radical hospitality. Welcome and entertain them all. Even the dark thought, the shame, the sorrow, welcome them, not because they are pleasant, but because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Imagine relating to your sadness not as a defect, but as a messenger. What is it trying to show you? What neglected part of you is asking to be seen? Most people fear that if they fully allow pain, it will consume them, but paradoxically, suppression gives pain more power. When you push grief away, it lingers in the background, shaping your reactions unconsciously. When you face it directly, it often softens. Tears come, the body trembles, memories rise, and then something loosens. There is movement, and movement is life. Stagnation is what suffocates. Rumi's poetry often circles around longing. Longing is a refined form of pain. It is the ache for connection, for meaning, for something beyond the visible. In modern culture, longing is often pathologized. We are told to be self-sufficient, to need nothing. But Rumi understood longing as sacred. Without longing, there is no depth. Without the ache for something more, there is no growth. Longing stretches the heart. It makes it larger than its previous limits. And yet, to honor longing, you must tolerate incompleteness. You must accept that some desires may never be fulfilled in the way you imagine. This is where maturity emerges, not from getting everything you want, but from learning to hold desire without being destroyed by its absence. When Rumi lost Shams, the grief was unbearable. But instead of collapsing into despair, he allowed the longing to turn inward. He discovered that what he sought externally had an echo within. The beloved he searched outside was also a presence inside his own being. This does not mean he stopped missing. It means he stopped believing that fulfillment could only come from one form. Pain redirected him. It pointed him inward, and in that inward turning, he found a source of love that was not dependent on circumstance. This is perhaps one of his most subtle teachings, that external loss can become internal discovery. But only if you are willing to sit in the space that loss creates, only if you resist the urge to immediately fill the void. Because the void is not empty, it is fertile, it is raw potential. And when you stop fearing it, when you stop labeling it as failure, you begin to sense that something new is quietly forming there. Quietly forming there, beneath the surface of your awareness. Something that could not have emerged without the fracture. Something that required the collapse of the old structure to make space for a wider sky. Rumi once wrote, "Be like a tree and let the dead leaves drop." There is grief in that image. Leaves do not fall without loss. But the tree does not cling to what has already completed its season. It releases, not because it does not care, but because holding on would prevent new growth. Pain often signals that a season has ended. A relationship, a dream, an identity, a belief about who you thought you were. The suffering intensifies when you try to force permanence onto what was always temporary. To let the dead leaves drop is an act of trust. It is trusting that life is cyclical, that emptiness is not the end, but a transition. Rumi's understanding of pain was inseparable from this trust. He saw existence as movement, constant unfolding. When you resist that unfolding, you experience friction. When you surrender to it, even sorrow begins to feel meaningful. Not pleasant, not easy, but meaningful. He also wrote, "Set your life on fire. Seek those who fan your flames." This fire is not destruction for its own sake, it is purification. Pain burns illusions, it burns false attachments, it burns the masks you wear to be accepted. What remains after the fire is often simpler, truer, more grounded. Think about your own life. The moments that shaped you most deeply were probably not the comfortable ones. They were the moments that forced you to question, to reevaluate, to rebuild. In those moments, something essential was forged. Modern culture often equates happiness with the absence of discomfort, but Rumi's wisdom suggests something more nuanced. Aliveness includes everything. Joy and sorrow are not opposites, they are partners. The deeper your capacity for sorrow, the deeper your capacity for joy. A heart that is never broken has never fully opened. When you allow yourself to feel pain consciously, you increase your range as a human being. You become less afraid of your own depth. And perhaps this is the secret hidden within his poetry. Pain is not an interruption of your spiritual path. It is the path. Every wound asks a question. Every disappointment reveals an attachment. Every loss invites a reorientation. If you approach suffering with curiosity instead of hostility, you begin to notice its intelligence. You begin to sense that life is not conspiring against you, but shaping you. This does not mean you should seek suffering. It means that when suffering arrives, as it inevitably will, you meet it with awareness. You breathe inside it. You listen. You ask, "What is this teaching me?" And sometimes the lesson is simple: to slow down, to soften, to forgive, to release. Other times, the lesson is profound: to change your direction entirely, to leave what is no longer aligned, to become who you were afraid to become. Rumi's voice continues to echo across centuries because it speaks to something timeless in us: the fear of pain, the resistance to loss, the longing for meaning. He reminds us that you are not weak for hurting, you are human, and within that humanity is immense depth. The wound you hide may be the very place where your light is waiting to enter. So the next time pain visits you, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is opening through me?" Instead of immediately escaping, experiment with staying, not forever, just long enough to feel the texture of the experience, long enough to notice that beneath the turbulence there is awareness, and that awareness is untouched, spacious, quiet, steady. In that space, you may discover what Rumi discovered: that the heart is vast enough to hold both agony and ecstasy, that loss can deepen love rather than destroy it, that the cure for pain is not always the removal of pain, but the transformation of your relationship to it. If this reflection resonated with you, if something in these words touched your own experience of suffering, then stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue exploring these deeper layers of life together. Give this video a like so it can reach someone else who may be silently carrying their own pain. And share it with a person who needs to hear that their wound is not the end of their story. Because sometimes the light enters exactly where we thought we were breaking.